He turned down the Ravens. The NFL rookie who said no thanks to Lamar Jackson and lit up the draft room. You hear the words and immediately think you misheard. Shedeur Sanders said what now? It's day 3 of the 2025 NFL Draft. Everyone's eyes are on the late-round quarterback drama. And then, boom, the headline hits. Shedeur Sanders turned down the Baltimore Ravens? Voluntarily? On purpose? As in, he chose not to be drafted by one of the most stable franchises in football because he didn't want to sit behind Lamar Jackson?
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Cue the collective record scratch across every sports talk show in America. The Ravens were set to grab Shedeur in the 5th round. Not ideal for a QB with a famous last name and a built-in storyline, sure, but still, being drafted by the Ravens? That's not a bad place to land. That's quarterback development heaven. But then came the twist no one saw coming. According to reports, Shedeur made it very clear. He had no intention of being a backup. Especially not to Lamar Jackson. Yeah. Let that one simmer for a second. You're talking about Lamar, 2-time MVP, human highlight reel Jackson. The man who turned running from the pocket into an art form. The heartbeat of the Ravens franchise. And Shedeur Sanders, yes, son of Coach Prime, rising star in his own right, basically said, nah, I'm good. But, so the Ravens did just that. They passed. And 3 picks later, the Cleveland Browns scooped him up. And that's when all hell broke loose on the airwaves. You had Stephen A. Smith practically combusting on live TV. Voice rising, eyes wide, hands flailing like he was conducting an orchestra of chaos. You're telling me this young brother passed on the Baltimore Ravens? To go to Cleveland? Have you seen the Browns quarterback room? It's a revolving door. Meanwhile, Cam Newton, former MVP, former star, and current sage of all things quarterback, came in cool and collected but firm. His take. Shedeur just made a rookie mistake that might haunt him for years. You can learn so much sitting behind a dude like Lamar, Cam said, like a disappointed uncle watching his nephew fumble a scholarship. You think you're ready now, but there's levels to this. Even Teddy jumped in. Yes, that Teddy, always the practical one, reminding everyone that the Ravens aren't just any team. They're a fortress, a well-oiled machine. They don't just draft you and toss you to the wolves. They build you. They developed Joe Flacco into a Super Bowl MVP, then built an entire offense around Lamar's unique skill set. If you're a young quarterback trying to actually succeed in the NFL, that's the house you want to be raised in. But here's the thing, Shedeur's not your average rookie. He's been groomed under the neon lights of Deion Sanders' college football circus. He's used to being the guy, not the backup, not the clipboard holder. So when he looked at the Ravens' offer, he didn't see a golden opportunity. He saw a red light, a dead end, a future holding a Microsoft Surface tablet on the sidelines while Lamar dances into the end zone for the 9th time that season. He didn't want to wait. He wanted to play. And that's where this whole story gets messy. Because on one hand you get it. Confidence is baked into his DNA. Shedeur's been the star of every field he's stepped on since high school. Why would he suddenly accept a backup role? Especially when, in his mind, he could start somewhere right now. But on the other hand, it's Lamar freaking Jackson. Not some fragile vet on the brink of retirement. Lamar's in his prime, the franchise loves him, and barring an alien abduction or scandalous TikTok meltdown, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So what exactly was the plan here? By declining Baltimore's interest, Shedeur took a gamble. A big one. One that now has him in Cleveland? Yes, the same Cleveland known more for quarterback busts than playoff wins. The Browns, who've gone through more quarterbacks in the last decade than Taylor Swift has gone through eras. This isn't exactly the developmental utopia you dream of as a rookie. And it's not just about on-field instability. The Browns have long struggled with culture, coaching turnover, and chaos management. You need a whiteboard just to keep track of who's calling the plays each season. And now, Shedeur Sanders, who could have had the mentorship of a generational QB and the structure of a top-tier franchise, is expected to flourish in that mess? Stephen A. wasn't having it. It's not about disrespecting yourself, he shouted. It's about strategizing for the future. Lamar isn't just a quarterback. He's a blueprint. You don't want to learn from that. And to be fair, he's got a point. There's a difference between betting on yourself and playing chess without knowing how the pieces move. Cam Newton broke it down further. When I was coming in, I would have killed to sit behind a dude like Peyton or Brady for a year. You think you're ready, but you're not. You only get one shot to develop right in this league. One. But maybe Shedeur's banking on something else. Maybe he sees himself not as a learn and grow prospect, but as a get in there and take over kind of guy. Maybe he looked at Cleveland and saw an opportunity to be the face of a franchise, not just another name on the depth chart. It's a bold move, but bold doesn't always mean smart. Because here's the real kicker. Shedeur didn't just pass on a quarterback room. He passed on a system, a culture, an identity. The Ravens aren't just known for defense anymore, they're a quarterback incubator. They protect you, teach you, develop you. And most importantly, they win. Meanwhile, the Browns? They're still trying to figure out who they are post-Baker Mayfield, post-Deshaun Watson drama, post-everything. And now they've got Shedeur, a young QB with sky-high expectations and the media spotlight already burning holes in his jersey before he's even taken a snap. And this isn't just about Shedeur. This is about how young athletes today approach their careers. It's the same conversation happening in boardrooms, locker rooms, and comment sections. Do you chase the spotlight or do you build your legacy in the shadows first? Do you prioritize playing time, or do you prioritize where you're playing? Because let's not get it twisted. Shedeur had a chance to enter a championship-caliber culture and turned it down. That's not just confidence. That's audacity. And the NFL? It has a way of humbling audacity real quick. Maybe he pulls a C.J. Stroud and lights it up from day one. Maybe he proves everyone wrong and becomes the Browns' savior. That'd be one hell of a redemption arc. But maybe, just maybe, he becomes another cautionary tale. Another young QB who thought he could skip the learning curve and got eaten alive by a broken system. Football history is littered with guys who had the talent but not the patience. And in this league, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a survival tactic. So where does this all leave us? Shedeur Sanders bet on himself. And hey, respect. That takes guts. But when you push your chips in, you better hope the table isn't rigged. Because if this thing goes sideways in Cleveland, the question won't be why he made the choice, it'll be how he didn't see it coming. One decision. One draft call. One team passed on and another walked in. That's all it takes to swing a career. And maybe years from now, we'll look back and say this was the moment Shedeur carved his own path, away from the shadow of Lamar, away from his father's glow into NFL greatness. Or maybe, we'll say this was the moment he flew too close to the sun, turned down the best possible teacher he could have had, and landed in the quarterback purgatory known as Cleveland. Only time will tell. But in the meantime? Oh, you know sports talk is eating this up. So what do you think? Was Shedeur making a bold power move or fumbling the biggest opportunity of his career? Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and tell us, would you have backed up Lamar Jackson? Because let's be real, some lessons are better learned from the bench. This wasn't just a football decision. This was a statement. Shedeur Sanders didn't just pass on the Ravens, he passed on the idea of waiting, of being second, of quietly grinding while someone else got the spotlight. And that's where things start to feel deeper than football. Because when your last name is Sanders, when your dad is Deion Primetime Sanders, walking swagger in a pair of gold cleats, being the guy isn't optional. It's expected. Shedeur didn't grow up around quiet confidence. He grew up in the middle of a brand. A brand that tells you to bet on yourself at all costs. A brand that built a whole college football team around a last name. So yeah, Shedeur walking into the NFL with his chin high and chest out? That's not surprising. What is surprising is the way he decided to swing his sword so early in the fight. Let's revisit the moment that never happened. Shedeur in a Ravens hoodie standing next to Lamar Jackson, clipboard in hand, soaking up knowledge like a sponge in a Super Bowl locker room. Can you imagine that mentorship? The reads, the footwork, the leadership, it would have been a masterclass in quarterbacking. Shedeur could have learned the NFL ropes from a guy who already broke the system. Instead, he's heading to Cleveland where quarterback careers go to get rebooted, or rebooted again. And yes, it's important to acknowledge that Shedeur probably sees something in Cleveland the rest of us don't. He has to. Maybe it's the coaching staff. Maybe it's a promise they whispered to his agent. Maybe it's a whiteboard vision of a franchise finally turning the corner. Maybe they told him, "You're our guy." That's a powerful sentence to a 21-year-old athlete with something to prove. But here's the problem. Everybody gets told they're the guy in Cleveland. Until they're not. Just ask the long, cursed list of QBs who came in with potential and left with bruises and broken confidence. The Browns are the NFL equivalent of that one friend who's always working on themselves, but never really changes. There's hope and there's history, and Cleveland's history is heavy. This is why Stephen A. and Cam Newton are so fired up. It's not just about what Shedeur did. It's about what he gave up. You don't just turn down the Ravens without raising eyebrows. That's the Harvard of quarterback development. The stable ship in a league full of sinking rafts. And let's talk about that fifth round thing for a second. Because that's where people started getting real loud online. The idea that Shedeur, who played under the brightest lights in college and has a built-in fan base, would fall to the fifth round felt like an insult. A power play by NFL GMs to humble the Sanders hype machine. You know how this league works. They don't just draft your talent, they draft your attitude. And Shedeur? He's got attitude in neon. So maybe this wasn't just about playing time. Maybe this was Shedeur saying, "You didn't believe in me? Then I'm not going where I'm not wanted." But the thing is, the Ravens did want him. They wanted him enough to put a draft pick on the table. They were willing to bring him into a championship-level culture and teach him the NFL way. He just didn't want what they were offering. And when you turn down development for immediate opportunity, that's a high-stakes bet. Let's not forget, NFL history is brutal to young quarterbacks who walk in thinking they're ready. It chews them up and spits them into the XFL before they can blink. For every Joe Burrow or CJ Stroud who shines instantly, there are 5 others who flop because the system was a disaster and the support wasn't there. Scheme matters. Coaching matters. Patience matters. Ask Aaron Rodgers if it killed him to sit behind Brett Favre for 3 years. Ask Patrick Mahomes if he regrets watching from the sidelines for a season while Alex Smith warmed the seat. Spoiler, they don't. Because that time wasn't wasted, it was forged. But Shedeur looked at all that history and said, "Not for me." And now the countdown begins. He's going to enter camp with expectations tighter than a Super Bowl spread. Browns fans, God bless them, are going to expect him to light it up. Not learn the system. Not ease into a role. They're going to want touchdowns. Fast. And the moment he stumbles, the critics are going to come back louder. "You could have been learning from Lamar," they'll say. "You could have sat behind an MVP. You chose this chaos." And if he succeeds? Oh, the victory lap will be deafening. See, his defenders will shout. He bet on himself. He knew. That's the risk. That's the drama. That's the delicious tension of this entire mess. But here's a wrinkle no one's really talking about yet. What happens if Lamar does get hurt this season? What happens if the Ravens do need a backup to step up, and Shedeur could have been the guy on deck, stepping into the national spotlight under one of the best infrastructures in the league? There's a world where he could have had it all. A year or 2 to learn, a coach who knows how to build quarterbacks, and when the time came, his moment. No instability. No pressure to carry a cursed franchise. Just the perfect runway. But that world closed the second he said, "No thanks." Let's be honest here, this story is less about sports and more about ego. About ambition. About timing. Because in the NFL, talent is only half the battle. The other half is landing in a system that knows what to do with you. The Ravens had that. Cleveland? TBD. You can almost hear Cam Newton's voice echoing again. "Man, if I could have just sat behind Brady for a year," there's regret in his tone. Because he knows what a good system can do for your career, and what a bad one can take from it. And then there's Dion. You know he's watching. You know he's got thoughts. Prime doesn't sit quietly on the sidelines, and neither do his sons. He raised them to take the shot, not wait for the perfect moment. But the NFL isn't college ball. There are no highlight reels that save you here. Only W's and L's. And if the losses pile up in Cleveland, that primetime confidence could turn into primetime questions. Still, it's impossible not to respect the guts it took for Shedeur to make this call. It's brash. It's risky. It's very on brand. But it's also a moment of no return. You either become the star you said you were, or you become the cautionary tale everyone warned you about. So here we are. One rookie. One decision. One rejected offer that might echo through his entire career. Is Shedeur Sanders the next breakout star who changed the quarterback narrative forever? Or is he the latest in a long line of prospects who mistook confidence for readiness, and found out the hard way that even talent needs time? We're about to find out. And no matter what happens next, one thing is for sure. He'll never get that Ravens jersey back. Alright, a rookie quarterback just ghosted the Ravens. And not just any rookie. Shedeur Sanders, football royalty, walking headline, and apparently the new CEO of Thanks But No Thanks, Baltimore Incorporated. Let's really sit in this moment for a second. Because this wasn't just a blip. This wasn't one of those draft day miscommunications or harmless agent posturing. This was deliberate. Calculated. A big, bold move from a guy who hasn't taken a single NFL snap but already knows exactly how he wants his legacy to play out. And that legacy? It doesn't involve carrying Lamar Jackson's helmet. See, most rookies walk into the league with 2 priorities: survive training camp and hope their jersey doesn't end up in the clearance bin by October. Not Shedeur. He's walking into Cleveland like it's Boulder, Colorado 2.0, expecting the stadium to bend to his storyline. Like the NFL is just season 2 of the Sanders Show and everyone's been patiently waiting for the next episode. And let's be honest, we kind of have. We watched him dominate headlines in college. We watched Coach Prime reinvent a program around him. We watched him throw for 500 yards one week and get sacked 8 times the next, still holding on to that QB1 energy like his life depended on it. So, when the NFL came calling, was it ever really about where he landed? Or was it about who had the best camera angle? Because if you believe the insiders, if you really believe the whispers coming out of draft rooms, this wasn't just about Lamar. It was about control, about narrative, about building a brand. And maybe that's the real twist in all this. Shedeur doesn't want to join a franchise. He wants to become one. But here's the catch. NFL franchises aren't built on vibes and charisma. They're built on consistency. On tape. On wins. On shutting up and showing out. And let me tell you right now, Cleveland is not going to coddle him. The honeymoon phase in that town lasts about 3.5 minutes. One bad throw? One lost game? One spicy soundbite in a post-game press conference? And suddenly it's, why didn't he sit behind Lamar for a year and learn how to read a blitz? Faster than you can say 3 and out. And trust, those receipts are being printed already. You can almost feel the vultures circling. The hot take machines are on full blast. NFL Twitter's already locked and loaded, waiting for the first interception so they can dunk with captions like Ravens dodged a bullet, or clipboard would have been safer. It's brutal. But that's the league. You make a loud entrance, you get a louder echo when things go wrong. Now let's pull back the curtain for a second. What happens behind these decisions? Because this wasn't Shedeur in a vacuum deciding his fate. You better believe this had layers. Agents. PR teams. Family group chats lighting up like it's draft bingo night. Was there pressure? Of course. There's always pressure. But there's also pride. Legacy. That Sanders name doesn't just carry clout, it carries expectation. And if you think Dion didn't have some input here, you haven't been paying attention. This is a family that moves intentionally. They don't do quiet. They don't do conventional. They don't wait their turn. That's the whole Sanders ethos. So when Shedeur says, I'm not here to sit, I'm here to start, it's not just confidence. It's gospel. But the NFL doesn't care about your gospel. It cares about your completion percentage. And this is where things get really interesting, because Shedeur didn't just say no to Lamar. He said no to an entire ecosystem built to support him. Think about it. What does every young quarterback need when they hit the pros? A mentor, a competent coaching staff, a solid offensive line, a smart front office, a defense that won't put them in a 31-10 hole every third quarter. Check, 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 and check. Baltimore had all of that. But Shedeur chose Cleveland. And while yes, Cleveland has talent, and yes, they've shown flashes of potential, let's not act like this is some QB utopia. It's more like a haunted house for hopeful arms. You walk in with dreams. You walk out with regrets. We've seen it before. Baker Mayfield, Johnny Manziel, Deshaun Kaiser, Brandon Weeden, Colt McCoy. The list goes on like a bad Tinder history, full of almost, maybes, and definitely nots. And now, they're giving the keys to a rookie who already turned down a mentorship under one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You starting to feel the stakes now? This isn't about who's got the better offense. This is about trajectory. One path had structure. The other has spotlight. And Shedeur picked the one with fewer guardrails. It's giving main character energy in a league that punishes delusion with a bench seat and a clipboard. But maybe, just maybe, that's what makes it exciting. Because what if he's right? What if Shedeur walks into Cleveland, takes the field, and lights it up? What if he reads defenses like a vet, scrambles like a magician, and turns that cursed franchise into playoff contenders? What if this was never about waiting, but about knowing you're ready before they tell you you are? If that happens, we're going to look back at this moment, the one where he said no to Baltimore, and call it iconic. Cool. Strategic. Primetime 2.0. He'll be the guy who refused to be a backup and then proved he didn't need to be. But if it goes sideways? If the sacks pile up and the losses mount and the Cleveland weather starts to match the vibes? Then he becomes the guy who thought the league would adjust to him, when he should have been adjusting to the league. And that, folks, is the razor's edge Shedeur is walking on right now. All confidence. No safety net. Just him, the field, and the pressure of every "I told you so" hanging in the air. You ever watch a tightrope act? That moment where the performer steps out, No harness, crowd holding its breath? That's Shedeur right now. And depending on the wind, he's either about to land the biggest trick of his life, or plummet in full view of the sports world. So what happens next? Training camp will be the first test. The media frenzy will be thick. The questions will be relentless. Every throw will be scrutinized. Every missed read will trend. The Ravens, on the other hand, will just be doing what they always do, winning quietly, grooming their backup, who's probably thrilled Shedeur passed, and prepping for another playoff run. Shedeur won't have that luxury. He's the story now. The main character. The risk taker. The guy who said no when everyone expected him to say thank you. And maybe that's the most powerful part of this entire saga. He knows what he did. He knows the backlash is coming. He knows the league is watching. And he still bet on himself. So whether you think he's arrogant or visionary, whether you're in the he fumbled camp or the future MVP club, one thing is certain. Shedeur Sanders just made the 2025 season must-watch TV. Now let's hear it. What would you have done? Sit behind Lamar and learn from a legend? Or go for the glory and take your shot in Cleveland? Hit the comments, subscribe for more sports drama that feels like an HBO pilot, and remember, in the NFL, every draft pick is a fork in the road. And Shedeur? He didn't just take the road less traveled, he built his own highway. Now let's see where it leads.